Well, mothers, and some of you, I get that Mother's Day sometimes comes with some baggage. I'm always talking about my parents. I understand that many have a lot of woundedness coming from childhood, and Mother's Day can be complicated. And I've always been very thankful for the parents that I've been given because I had such a wonderful childhood. And I wish that every child, sometimes I'm in the stores and I hear parents just yelling at their kids, and I just want to take the kids under my wing and comfort them. And so I understand today that Mother's Day can be difficult, not just for you as a son or a daughter, but moms. Some of you here, you've walked through difficult times with your kids. Some of you have always wanted kids and never had the opportunity. When we celebrate Mother's Day, I always say that today, moms, all of you women, whether you've had a biological child or not, you are welcome under the tent. I am a big believer in spiritual mothering. I'm a big believer that you don't have to give birth in a biological manner to be a mother, that I know many of you have poured out into other sons and daughters. And so please make sure all of you make your way to the tent. We want to celebrate you this morning. My hope and my prayer today is that, ladies, you would feel inspired, you would feel full of hope and courage as you leave here today. And so with that in mind, I'll be honest, Nick, who worked so hard, and how many of you appreciated Nick's countdown? I had to be sure to come in and watch his countdown. Honestly, I was a bit hesitant in the previous weeks to declare my sermon title, Becoming a Proverbs 31 Woman, because if all of the people in here were just women, many of the women would have a little bit of an issue and baggage with Proverbs 31. For many women, it has been a source of feeling like they've never measured up, of failure, of trying to attain something that feels unattainable. And so I was hesitant to even put that up there. But this is the Word of God. And I want us today, as we look at this passage, I want us to look at it. It's not just, another Mother's Day Proverbs 31 message. No, we're going to look at a correct interpretation of Proverbs 31. How many of you would like a correct interpretation of Proverbs 31 and what that means for us, right? And so today, in this whole passage, our highlight, our verse that we really want to look at is going to be at the end in verse 30 that says, "A woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised." She shall be praised. What has happened with Proverbs 31 is that we've gotten sidetracked by everything that this woman has done, and we miss really the whole point. And so today I want us to get this whole point. So we're going to take a little bit of a journey through Proverbs 31. We're going to discover a few attractions on the way. And so we're going to start in first gear. See, now how many of you have driven a stick shift before? Mom was having to refamiliarize herself with it on the drive over because that is the Mustang. My first car was a stick shift, and I'm forever thankful that that was my first car so that I could learn how to drive in that way. So today we're going to just shift our way through this sermon. And so here in first gear, I want us to look at a couple of interesting facts about Proverbs 31. And in Proverbs 31, this is a passage that is not just a list of who this woman was. This is actually a poem. Proverbs 31 is a poem, and each line begins with a letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And so what is happening throughout this passage is that every time we have another letter and another letter, it's a poem. And it's a poem, and how many of you ever said a phrase like, when we're talking about, I'm going to totally cover a topic from A to Z, we say that, right? Meaning that we're going to cover a topic in its entirety. And so our takeaway from this poem is in the same sense. Every Hebrew letter is the beginning line. And so from A to Z, they are covering what this woman consists of. And so, first of all, it isn't just this list of everything this woman is capable of. It is a poem that is more than that. It is the telling of the fruit of what we're going to discover is the real driving factor of what drives this woman. And so we're going to take a broad look at this woman, and I'm going to be reading today out of New King James. And I want us just to begin by reading through the passage, and then we're going to dive into it. So starting in verse 10, who can find a virtuous wife? I want to take note there that a lot of passages will say noble. Who can find a noble wife? For her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She also rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and a portion for her maidservants. She considers a field and buys it. From her profits, she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms. She perceives that her merchandise is good, and her lamp does not go out by night. She stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her hand holds the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor. Yes, she reaches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household is clothed with scarlet. She makes tapestry for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them and supplies sashes for the merchants. Strength and honor are her clothing. She shall rejoice in time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and on her tongue is the law of kindness. She watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many daughters have done well, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is passing. But a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. Do you know that Hebrew men memorize this? And at Shabbat, they will quote it to the wife, to the mother. So men, get busy. Maybe you could write an updated version to say to your wife. Darren, you going to do that? For the next men's breakfast, you can all work on memorizing it together. Listen, we're going to be taking a bit of a broad look at this woman. I'm not wanting to get into the weeds of everything that she does. The truth is that this is a woman of ancient times, and her context is that of her household. And the household was not just your typical household, but that was the means of provision, agriculture, merchandise. This was a woman that was a businesswoman. She looked after her household, but she was a businesswoman. She strengthened her arms. She was a wise woman. And for centuries, this passage has been used to confine women to look a certain way and to be a certain way. This is the context for this woman. What is your context today? Many of our moms, I think we have just a couple of maybe stay-at-home moms. For the most part, our households today, though, are dual working. There's not a stay-at-home parent for the most part. And so our context today for what a woman is doing is very different from the context of this ancient Hebrew woman. And so this passage isn't necessarily about what she's giving herself to. So if you're saying, well, I can't do all of that, that's okay. You don't have to do all of that. You don't have to go out and buy a spindle and start weaving clothes for your family unless you want to, and then have at it. But for so long, women have felt like it's confined them in their home, it's confined their voice. And the truth is that our homes don't look like this anymore. They're not centers for agriculture and trade. It looks different today. And so today what I want to do is to, first of all, as we shift into second gear, I want us to redeem the Proverbs 31 woman. I want to redeem her name because if truth be told, many of us hear Proverbs 31 woman and go, ugh. I'm just being honest of what I hear women when they come to me. This, at the first verse in verse 10, who can find a virtuous wife? Who can find a noble wife? Do you know what this word noble really means? What this word virtuous really means? It's not this meek picture that we get in our head. The truth is that whether your version is reading virtuous, excellent, or noble, they all mean the same thing. They mean capable. They mean brave. They mean power. It means victory. It means a valiant soldier. It is specifically referring to military strength. That is what noble means. That, I would say, is not a meek woman. This is a woman of strength, of power. In fact, in a couple of other places in this passage, we see the same military connotations. In verse 11, where it says that the husband lacks nothing of value, that value that is referring to is that of spoils. The spoils of warfare are what the man has because of the woman and her valiant strength and power. In verse 15, when it says that she's providing food, it is talking about food of prey. That word prey is in there. That is that hunter. I know we got some women in here that hunt. How many of you have taken down some animals in here, ladies? Yeah, Kristen back there, I see your hand. Fish? Hey, I've caught myself a fish. I don't know if it's in the same manner of shooting a gun. It is? That's only because you haven't hunted. You're saying, yes, it is. Somebody take him out to hunt. He's got to learn how to hunt so he can go on a loan and win us $100,000. $500,000, somebody take that man out. Teach him how to hunt, because I've told him, don't come back until you have the money. Verse 17 talks about girding herself with strength. Do you know what girding is? Girding is when a soldier, because they used to wear longer clothing, and they would take it and tie up their outfit and gird it so they would have freedom of movement to fight. And here we see this woman girding herself as a soldier girds himself for movement in battle. All throughout this passage, what we see is a woman of strength, of power, that is fighting for her household, that is fighting for her family. And can I say, ladies, that we have an enemy, that he is after your family. He is after to steal, kill, and destroy your family. He's after your marriage. He wants to steal, kill, and destroy your marriage. And he will not play fair. It requires a woman of strength. It requires a noble woman of military might and power to say, no, not here. No, not here, not here. I draw a line in the sand, so to speak. A woman of military strength, power, victory, and bravery. I've sat across so many women that would never even consider themselves in that manner. And left in ourselves, maybe not. But what did we learn last week? What is in the sanctuary of his presence? Strength and bravery, right? Strength and bravery. And so what we're looking at today is a heroic poem. What do we see all throughout? In fact, Darren just read it out of Moses. Miriam was singing. It was a song of heroism of what God had done. And so many times in battles of Israel, when there was victory, what did they do? They began to write poems and write songs of the great victory. And so this is a poem. It is a heroic poem of victory and might of women. It is a heroic poem of how God regards the work of women. This is the inspired word of God. This is how he views women. Strength and power and bravery and might. Some of us need to view ourselves the way God had intended. And so more than portraying here a to-do list for women, and you know me, I love a good to-do list. Darren loves it when I give him to-do lists. Usually he says, I love you. I know when he says that, I'm like, mm-hmm. More than portraying a to-do list of women, this passage is revealing wisdom in action. Wisdom in action. If we are just trying to copy this woman's to-do list, most of us would never measure up. You may be a great Martha Stewart, but to be honest, Martha Stewart's got a great team of people. But she pays a lot of money. Most of us cannot measure up to the to-do list of the Proverbs 31 woman. What we need to get today is the spirit and the motivation that drives this woman. What drives you? There's a couple of women in the Old Testament I was thinking of that are like-mannered to the Proverbs 31 woman in this way. One is Ruth. In fact, the word for noble woman in Proverbs 31 is used one other time with a woman, and it was Ruth. And you remember the story of Ruth, right? That she married Naomi's sons. They died, and Naomi's moving back home, and Ruth says, your people are my people. I'm going to go where you go. And she ends up gleaning in the field because of their poverty, gleaning in the field to provide for them. And because of how she treats her mother-in-law, Boaz, the owner, he says to her, when we find out that they are related, so he's the kinsman redeemer, he can marry Ruth. And so when Ruth approaches, his response to her is this: my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do what you ask. I will be your kinsman redeemer. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Ruth carried the same spirit of the Proverbs 31 woman. Listen, it was hard work gleaning. This is a woman of strength, of bravery. It could be dangerous work. In fact, Boaz had extended his covering, his protection over Ruth in the fields and said, make sure no harm comes to her. It could be a dangerous work. But Ruth carried a noble character. She rose up with that brave and courageous spirit to take care of her mother-in-law. I think of Deborah, a prophetess that rose to become a judge of Israel, the only woman judge that we read about in Israel. She would sit under a palm tree, and all of Israel would come to her for judgment. And when it came time, because for 20 years they had been oppressed by a wicked king, and when it came time to go to battle, she told the head of the army, hey, God says it's time to go and fight. And he's like, yeah, I'm not going, Deborah, unless you go with me. And so Deborah had to go with him as he led them in victory. And then interestingly, in that account, it was another woman, Jael, that dealt the final death blow to the wicked king. Deborah carried the same spirit of the Proverbs 31 woman. She was a woman of courage, of valor, power, bravery to fight the battle of Israel, the enemy of Israel. And no less can we do for our families, for our households. As we move into third gear here today, I want us, because here's why interpretation is so important of the Bible. You can't just take a verse and be like, oh, that's cool, and I want it to look like this and believe this. So I think that's what I'll believe about that verse. No, we got to look at it in light of other things, right? And one of those things is the book that you find it in. And so when we look at the book of Proverbs overall, we see a couple of interesting things. And one is that you cannot read Proverbs 31 and not see the parallelism, the correlation to Lady Wisdom of Proverbs chapter 8. And so for a few moments here in third gear, I want us to look at the Proverbs 31 woman and how she correlates with the Proverbs 8 woman, because I think it's going to help us in understanding what drives and motivates us in what we're doing. And so I'm going to read just a few verses of Proverbs 8, and then we're just going to do a comparison. But it's talking about Lady Wisdom and who Lady Wisdom is. She was not a god or goddess at all, but she was there at the beginning of creation. It says, the Lord brought me forth as the first of his works before his deeds of old. I was formed long ago at the very beginning when the world came to be. I was constantly at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, in his whole world, and delighting in mankind. Now then, my children, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways, the ways of wisdom. Listen to my instruction and be wise. Do not disregard it. Blessed are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorway. For those who find me find life and receive favor from the Lord. But those who fail to find me harm themselves. All who hate me love death. This is Lady Wisdom of Proverbs 8. That's a portion of her description. So she was there at the very beginning of the creation. Now, I'm going to quickly, we're not going to read the chapter for the sake of time, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a list of traits that we see both in Lady Wisdom and in our noble woman of Proverbs 31. She fears the Lord. In Proverbs 8, fears the Lord, hating evil, pride, and arrogance. 31 is described as a woman who fears the Lord. The trait of instruction and wisdom. Lady Wisdom speaks what is noble, true, and right, and the valiant woman of Proverbs 31 opens her mouth with wisdom. To be treasured over jewels. Lady Wisdom is incomparably superior to jewels, and our noble woman is more precious than jewels, given her rarity. The trait receives honor and praise. Lady Wisdom possesses honor, and our noble woman is praised for her surpassing works. Possesses strength. Lady Wisdom has strength and insight. The noble woman clothes herself with strength. Is industrious and active. Lady Wisdom is described as a master workman. Our noble woman diligently provides for others. Influences for the sake of others. Proverbs 8, by her kings reign justly. Noble woman cares for others and meets the needs of the poor. And finally, enriches those who find her. Lady Wisdom is accompanied by riches and brings blessing and favor. Our noble woman does good all her days, ensures no lack of gain, and brings honor. Do you see how similar Lady Wisdom and the Proverbs 31 woman are? There's a correlation between the two, and it is important that we get this. Because the truth is that Lady Wisdom represents the entirety of creation. She is a principle that undergirds entire creation. She's a pillar that upholds it all. She was there at creation as a companion to the Creator. I mean, just think about that for a while. To be at the very beginning of creation, this wisdom of the Ancient of Days. And then we have the Proverbs 31 woman. And she doesn't represent all of creation, but she represents her work. She represents her limited local context. She represents her local community. And her portrayal is very descriptive of a woman's ordinary life. Like Lady Wisdom, she seems perfect, doesn't she? The perfect woman, the high standard. And so it's no wonder that so many women feel exhausted when they're told they have to be like her. Here's what it sums up. As the worthy woman of Proverbs 31 nobly is living out her ordinary life, taking kids to soccer, cooking meal after 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 meal, laundry after laundry after laundry after laundry after laundry. You can fill in the blank of your ordinary day. The beautiful thing of this is that she mirrors the deep and ancient wisdom that was there from the beginning of time. You're not just an ordinary woman doing the ordinary. You're a woman that is mirroring the ancient wisdom. The very foundation, your roots, your life is rooted in the creation narrative. The wisdom that you are invited into is rooted at creation. And your ordinary life is just really not that ordinary. It's rooted in the wisdom of creation. That should elevate your ordinary. That should change how you do the ordinary. And I would like to say I always feel victorious. And I feel, the power of the ancient one in my laundry. And my family would tell you that I probably don't. But to know as I'm growing in the fullness of God, that I am mirroring this ancient wisdom, Lady Wisdom. That's what Proverbs 31 is about. It's not about her to-do list. It's the fact that she mirrors Lady Wisdom. Unfortunately, Proverbs 31 has functioned as a law, as a list of demands and to-dos. And completely, it's wanted to put women into a particular mold. That if you're a godly woman, this is what it has to look like. And then we wonder why women are resistant. I don't want to be put in a mold. Instead, it's an invitation. An invitation to women to step out, to seek wisdom about your particular gifts, about your particular calling, about the particular plans and purposes that God's put in your life. It's an invitation to step out and seek wisdom in these gifts and callings and purposes and labor for the Lord. This should give us hope. I love Abigail. She's one of my favorite women of the Bible. I love Abigail. She was married to such a foolish, foolish man. Such a foolish man. And Abigail was a woman, it says, of good understanding. And it's the same word there used for noble and wisdom. And when her husband failed to cover and protect the family, that nobleness of Abigail rose up and went out to this anointed King David, this mighty soldier who was about to wipe out her house. And she's like, no, wait. Here are the provisions you need. Don't do it, David. Don't shed blood, David. You're the king. Don't shed blood. She was not a timid woman hiding out behind her foolish husband. She stepped up with power and bravery and might in a noble manner, and she saved her household. And when her husband died in his foolishness, she became the wife of King David. I love Abigail because it's in Abigail's ordinary life that she does extraordinary things. And so as we are moving into fourth gear, we're getting closer. I want to ask the question to you, what drives you? What drives you? Our text, a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. To fear the Lord is to honor the Lord, is to revere the Lord. It is to worship the Lord. And so if what is driving you is to look like the Proverbs 31 woman, listen, that's not what she got praised for, her list of dues. What she got praised for was fearing the Lord, was her worship of the Lord. You will never measure up to her task list. You will never measure up. But that's okay, because what we're called to do is to fear the Lord. What we're called to be as women is to worship the Lord. To worship the Lord with your kids and talk with your kids on the way to soccer. To worship the Lord and talk with your kids as you're cooking dinner. To worship the Lord and talk with your family about his goodness while you're watching movies. And they roll their eyes at you because you can once again make spiritual application of the storyline. Just be quiet, watch the movie. This woman was not praised because of all she had accomplished. She was praised because she feared the Lord, because she worshiped the Lord. In all of her doing, what drove her was worshiping the Lord. What drives you? What drives you? All throughout Proverbs, we see this theme. And at the very beginning in chapter 1, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. It says in chapter 9, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. If what is driving you is worship is honoring the Lord in all that you do, here's what you do. You open up your life to the door of wisdom. When you open the door to wisdom, then you will experience the fruit of wisdom. The truth is that her list of to-dos is the fruit of her fear of the Lord. And we get so focused on copying her fruit. Listen, you're an apple tree and you're trying to copy an orange tree. You got to be fearing the Lord, and then you just want to flourish as an apple tree. You've got apples coming all out of the place. You got apples to give away, a generosity. You got apples to plant here and here and here. And wherever you plant your apples, they're going to grow up and they're going to bear fruit and they're going to succeed. Why? Because you quit trying to be like the orange tree. You invited the wisdom that comes from the fear of the Lord. And it doesn't matter what you do and how you look like the person on Facebook you keep stalking. Listen, you're created in the image of God to be you. And as you are you and you worship God being you, you will see the fruit of Proverbs 31. And so we know what the fruit of wisdom looked like for Proverbs 31 woman. My question today for us is, what would wisdom look like in your life today? If you were to revere God in everything, if you were to worship God in everything, what would wisdom look like in your life? If you were to worship God in all that you do, what would wisdom look like in your life? What would this Hebrew poem be describing your life? This morning, the team is going to come. And as they're coming, I want to just finish us off in fifth gear for you to cruise on out of here. At the beginning of the book of Proverbs, woman wisdom sounds out the invitation to the simple man to enter her house. Come and enter my house, she calls out. There's an invitation, and I love that invitation because it's not wisdom calling for all the super smart people to come into her house. It's for the simple. It's for the people that don't have much wisdom and knowledge, saying, come in. Lady Wisdom is calling you in and wants to bestow wisdom to you. By the end of Proverbs, what we have is what the picture looks like when that simple man chooses to enter into wisdom. Metaphorically, what we have is taking wisdom on as the wife. God calls us to choose wisdom, to marry her, to become one with wisdom. And that begins with living life driven by worship, with living life driven by serving our God. And if there's one thing that I want my kids to see in my life, whether they agree with me or not, if they can say she's worshiped, she's been consistent in everything, in worshiping God, in fearing God, that's all I need. I know I've failed in many areas as a mom, as a wife. But if they can at least say, well, she tried her best worshiping and fearing the Lord, then we've accomplished our goal. So what drives us? Today, ladies, I want us to shake off any feelings of failure, because I know what it is as a mom. How many of you older ones wish, man, if I knew now what I did when I was 8, I wish I could go back and reparent again. Wouldn't that be great, knowing what we know now? But we can't. But time and time again, I see women carrying shame and regret. Listen, it's time to let that stuff go. That's part of what the enemy uses to steal, kill, and destroy. And then today, let's say, you know what? I'm going to rise up as a noble woman. I'm going to rise up in bravery. I'm going to rise up in power and strength and might as a noble woman. Because the truth is I don't care how old your kids are. I don't care if they're other people's kids. When Darren said, how many of you are believing for a miracle? I believe every one of us should have a hand raised, because I believe there are people that we're believing and fighting for. I believe there are situations that we are believing and fighting for. And it requires us to rise up in nobleness. It requires us to rise up not in our own strength and might, but in the power and the might and the strength of the Lord, worshiping through it, serving Him through it, not backing down, not when it gets tough, when it gets hard, when you're exhausted, to not back down, but to rise up in nobleness and say, I'm going to worship even more. I'm going to fear God even more. I'm going to revere God even more, because what I'm fighting for is worth fighting for. My households I'm fighting for. My children, my great-grandchildren, my great-great-grandchildren I'm fighting for. It is not a one and done thing. We're believing for legacies. We are fighting for legacies. We're fighting not just for our households, but for the households of this area, of this region, of this world. Why? Because we are women of God. Because we are noble women of God who's called us to something beyond ourselves. And He has put inside of you the ability to tap in to the Ancient of Days, the ancient wisdom, and to rise up in a way you've never thought you could. You never thought you could. Listen, it's time to do that. It's time to do that. There's no waiting for something magical to happen. There's not waiting for it to get a little easier and then I will. It's when you are in the deepest pit. It's when it feels like the bombs of the enemy are just bombing you all around on every side. That is when it is required for you to rise up in nobleness. That's the time when it's time for you to say, I will rise in the spirit of the Proverbs 31 woman. And I'm going to, whatever I do, I'm going to do it worshiping. I'm going to do it serving. And I'm believing for the fruit to be released. And so here's this morning what I want us to do. In a moment, we're going to go outside. Your kids can play. We've got gifts. We've got Lotus drinks for you out under the tent. But for the next 5 minutes here, I want us to just, whatever you feel like you are, cannot be your truth. I feel weak and I feel like I have failed. Cannot be your truth. It may be your truth, but it can't be the truth you live in. You've got to start saying, I'm living in the truth of what God has said about me. And God has given to me this lady wisdom. And I'm going to stop making excuses. Well, God, it's so hard. It is hard. But you have immeasurably more than what you could ask or believe available to you. You have the courage and the bravery available to you. And so this morning, I want us to take our first step at being a woman of valor. I want us to take our first step at being a noble woman. Maybe you haven't felt that way. Well, today is the day. And we're going to just for a moment sing this song over our families. We're going to sing it over our friends. We're going to sing it over our city. And we're going to rise up, not in our own stuff, our own abilities, strength, and might, but we're going to rise up by faith as God-fearing women, as worshiping women. And we're going to say, as a noble woman, as a brave woman, I'm going to release this into the atmosphere of my household, of my city, of my church. Amen? So will you stand with me this morning? And for the next 5 minutes or so, let's just begin to do that. If you've got the stuff, if you've been carrying the baggage, I want you to let it go. Let it go. You can't keep carrying that baggage and become the woman of nobleness. You got to let it go and look to the one who empowers you, makes you strong, and makes you brave.